What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Got a very special guest for y'all today. Jackson Frank, friend of the channel, NBA Twitter personality, my coworker slash editor at Sportscasting, Basketball Insiders, and we're here to talk about some of your early season overreactions. There's nothing like overreacting in early season NBA. I think one of our buddies texted us like, "There's nothing like a good early season overreaction, like the first day of basketball," and that really is true. So, Jackson, thanks for coming on, and how you doing today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here and gauge some of these overreactions. I think you fielded this last week, so we've like doubled the sample we have of games, which
Mhm.
makes them a little less of
I
overreactions,
was
which
gonna
is
say, I think this is
kind of
good
fun.
because we fielded these questions, like you said, about a week ago, and a lot of these, we've got new information. So, some of these overreactions maybe looked more prescient than we might have thought, and some of them maybe not. But we're just going to read through all of your reactions. We got a ton of comments on YouTube, Blue Sky, Twitter. Thank you to everyone who sent comments, and we'll get to as many as we can today. But without further ado, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let's get to the first two set of questions. No, I didn't mention we're going to be buying or selling these overreactions. Are we buying them? Are we selling them? We have two related to transition defense. So at Claytheist11 says, my overreaction is that terrible transition defense is here to stay. The energy/time expended in full court pressing and crashing the offensive glass is going to lead to some wild transition numbers that many teams cannot handle. And then a very related one at Sheed in ATL says, a lot of teams are trying to copy the Pacers, but full court pressure is overrated and should only be applied in very specific situations. So two questions, do we think this is kind of a blip in terms of trends of how teams are playing? And do we think it's going to burn teams in the end?
I think I definitely agree with the first one that poor transition defense is here to stay. I think with teams really trying to maximize the possession count more so than the possessions themselves, you're going to see more teams take risks trying to steal outlet passes or stay back and crash the glass with 3 or 4 guys. Whereas the other team is going to leak out more and find counters there. So I definitely agree with that. I think it's a strong take. And just the reality too is the game continues to get harder and harder to weather through 82 games, and transition defense is really really hard to be good at. Even if you do apply a lot of effort to it, you're just at such a disadvantage defensively that I think teams are being smarter about that. So I would agree with that one for sure. I think it's hard to suggest otherwise, just based on kind of the trends we've seen over the years, whether it's play style or specific things that teams are emphasizing.
For sure. I'm also going to be buying this one. I think it's also kind of like you alluded to, teams just being smarter about how they're applying like offensive transition. I mean, I think about like going back to the Pacers in the playoffs last year, how masterfully I think they're the example obviously of how masterfully not only they push, but like Pascal gets up the floor ceiling, and you're seeing a lot of teams I think really, using that wrinkle well. Um, it might get like a little better. I'm curious how you think this is kind of gonna boil over in the playoffs, because obviously I think generally playoffs means transition frequency decreases, but we still saw a decent amount of it last year. So do you think that as we kind of move away from the regular season, that this kind of these issues with transition defense and like possession countings are gonna sustain and be kind of parts of modern basketball, or not necessarily modern basketball, just for the moment in 2025, 2026?
Yeah, I think it's a good question when you're kind of specifying the difference between playoff and regular season application. Um, I tend to say it's not going to be as egregious. I just think transition defense is kind of one of those things in the margin. You see less emphasis among regular season teams, especially those that are going to be good, that are going to compete for high seed, home court advantage, all that sort of stuff. But I think in the playoffs, you see teams really start to nail the margins more so. So I would be skeptical of saying kind of the same lackadaisical trends we've seen the last few years defensively are going to carry over to the playoffs and transition wise. But I do think kind of bleed into the other question we're addressing here with kind of the way that teams are applying more and more full court pressure when maybe they don't have the personnel to do so, as well as a team like Indiana or Oklahoma City have, given those are kind of the torchbearers for that movement. Just having played Game 7 and both made it to the brink and then also won a finals. So I think it's easier to kind of play faster, even if it's not like an actual transition possession, like just getting out, beating your man, having multiple handlers on the floor to kind of counteract maybe one really good presser and create easier chances, I think could carry over. But kind of the broad trend of it to the playoffs, I think I'd be a little more skeptical about.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, kind of leading into this next question of full court pressure being kind of overrated, I think like you said, I tend to agree and think we'll probably see that bear out in the postseason. But like you said, I think part of why like the OKC and Indiana pressing thing worked because they had the defensive personnel to make that scheme work. And like some teams who do, like Portland, I think certainly does to the extent that like a pressing team can. They're loaded with athletic, rangy wings. And they have one of the best on-ball defenders in the world in Tuani Kamara, who's probably to me one of the best press defenders as well. Like, sadly, my guy Blake Wesley's injured. He was having a fun little year on defense. But for me, the way I think of like the full court pressure stuff, like especially for the playoffs, right? That's kind of the subtext of this question. It's like, doesn't really matter if you shouldn't be emulating this strategy as your kind of main. I always think of it as like, I think it's always good to have in your back pocket as a mix up. Like that's how I think of like the full court pressure stuff related to like the playoffs and building around it. I just think having as many tools in your defensive toolkit, whether like in certain matchups, certain stretches of games, of quarters, whatever, where pressing is useful. I think that's good, but also good offenses and good teams in the playoffs are going to find ways to counter it. Like they're going to set ball screens higher up on the floor. They're going to, quick blind take actions, especially in the postseason. Like, and we saw even the Thunder, like, in that series, find great ways to counter it. We saw the Pacers back off pressure in that series for games, right, to kind of counter the counter. So I think it's all just about like mix-ups and matchups as always, but I don't think it's like, I can't imagine we're going to see like all the playoffs teams just like full court pressing the whole time and that happening, but it would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think the key too is you're seeing a lot of teams that don't have the personnel to full court press with the point of attack defender do it. Like everybody, like nobody who's really good at it. There's not just a guy who's a specialist, right? Who's only good at pressing in the backcourt, and then all of a sudden on the ball in the half court, they're bad at it. So if you have a guy who can kind of wrangle with star guards or star wings or star big ball handlers in the half court, you should definitely have them, press in the backcourt if
For sure.
like their stamina allows for. But like I was watching a Bucks Raptors game recently, the Raptors won earlier this week, and they had Cole Anthony pressing in the backcourt, and the Raptors had a really easy bucket. And then I was watching Wolves Knicks, and they had someone in the backcourt pressing who I think wasn't kind of equipped to do that. Those are where I think the issues reside, right? That you can't just have token ball pressure because you're playing 5-on-4, and it goes back to kind of being just a pseudo transition play, which is going to be a really hard numbers game to win. So
for sure,
you have a Nembhard, a Kaysen Wallace, and Alex Caruso, a Drew Holiday, Toumani Camara, guys and teams we've mentioned already. And absolutely, yeah, you should go for it because it's going to work the same way pressing the ball in the half court does in the backcourt. But with kind of these nominal pesky on-ball defenders that you wouldn't really rely upon to be an elite stopper, I think is where you're really kind of forcing it. So
definitely. I remember I think it was like the second Spurs game of the year where the Nets were just like pressing Dylan Harper out to half court and he's just like walking by them every time. And it's like if you're gonna like ask rookies and random, non-elite defenders to do this like very difficult thing, like anyone who's played basketball knows how taxing it is to like play a good press for any amount of time. And like it's all, it might not be as like mentally taxing as half court defense, but it certainly is like extremely physically taxing.
And there's probably a little bit of value for a rebuilding team like Brooklyn learning how to navigate kind of the backside of if a full court point of attack guy gets beat and how to react to that. But when you're looking at a team like Minnesota or Milwaukee, who both obviously have significant playoff aspirations. I'm not sure
Yeah.
sending guys. I don't disagree in general. I remember watching that game as well and it looking pretty
Yeah.
futile, but there's definitely kind of a benefit to rebuilding
For sure.
habits.
There could definitely be a developmental approach. It's like, I might as well like get these guys playing hard, try to be chaotic. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. There's been some like good teams trying to mix in the press, maybe just because I feel like it's the thing to do. But then again, I think there's some teams mixing it in and using like pressure really thoughtfully. Like the Celtics, I think are a good example of that, who've been quite a bit better on defense than I expected them to be at this point, in part because I think they're playing much more aggressively than they usually do over the last under Joe Mazzulla at least. But
yeah, and I think you're seeing too more and more teams, which ties back into something Indiana did as a counter to its own full court press. It's just like denying the guys the ball altogether. Like there's a difference right between you're almost like trapping a guy single handedly versus just pressing him and delaying the shot clock and giving a team less margin for error. But you're seeing kind of these guys almost just be shut down cornered where their only job is to deny a star scorer the ball and kind of force a team that doesn't have a secondary ball handler to create and do it that way. So I do kind of wonder what the push and pull of those two things are, because I think they're related styles, but they're different in execution and impact for sure in terms of how the offense reacts. So that's something I feel like we're going to see more and more of, is like not waiting until the ball gets passed in to start pressing them and whittling on the clock, like trying to prevent them altogether from getting the ball and forcing someone who's uncomfortable handling the ball or just ill-equipped to do so, kind of having to initiate offense and putting a drag on its team, on their team.
Just waiting for someone to bust out like the 1-2-2 J Wright full court press or the diamond and like, let's get real college basketball in here. But enough talk about pressing. Those were great questions. I'm going to move on to, we had a bunch of questions about the Magic and Paolo. So we're going to loop them together. At Caspian Wit 92, shout out Stevie, says, Paolo contract is the worst in the NBA, parentheses, by my take. At HLOU Pau Pika, I definitely messed that up, said, Magic should try to move on from Paolo. I've never rated him very highly, but he's been even worse than I expected. I don't think Franz and Paolo work as a pairing. And then at Easy Scheme Mafia says, the Magic need to fire their coaching staff immediately. Between slow starts on offense to competing poorly against low-ranked opponents, Desmond Bane also needs to be in more offensive sets, blah, blah, blah. Point being, just a lot of complaints about Orlando and their offense. So I guess let's first kind of take on like the Paolo angle. I'm going to say right now, I don't think he's the worst contract in the NBA. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not buying it. He's not the worst contract in the NBA. That's a really high bar.
I mean, he's on a rookie max. It's hard to be. I mean, unless it was like a true bust of a player getting a rookie max, you're not going to be the worst.
He's making less money than Zach LaVine. Like he's
next year he's going to be the 35th highest paid player. That's before I'm sure a few more contracts kick in next free agency window. So
I'm definitely more interested in the idea of whether or not like the long-term path forward with Paolo is the optimal one, because I think it's like, yeah, he's not worth his contract at the moment, probably in terms of impact, but like that's kind of what you bake in with these rookie scale extensions sometimes, especially with guys like Paolo. Like, so it's not gonna say that. But do you think that the path, like the optimal path forward for the Magic, is with Paolo? Because hasn't been good for the Magic so far. Hasn't been good for Paolo, though. I know we both talked about in our own separate ways the kind of approach changes that Paolo has made this year. So curious to see where your head's at on this one, whether or not you think the Franz Paolo thing should be kind of worked through.
I think it's a real question that could certainly be approached this offseason. I have talked about Paolo becoming a much better and more physical driver this year. The shot making hasn't quite been there, but he's been which has been part of the issue his entire career, but it's been like the worst it's ever been this year. So even if he gets to career norm levels, he'll be like, the way he's redistributed.
Right, he's making 24% of his threes.
Yeah, and like 30% of his like short mid-range jumpers like in the paint. So he'll still have a career best efficiency season if he keeps this approach and kind of gets some positive regression there. But it's very much a genuine question, kind of to wonder. Like, I would say Franz is a better all-around player still, even if because of the defense, but also offensively, I think his kind of more fluid driving style lends itself easier to play off of and guys how to work around. And even if though Franz isn't a great off-ball shooter, I think his more fluid style extends to off the ball as well with his cutting, his short rolling, and so and Paolo is just a poor off-ball player, not a very good shooter, which Franz isn't either. But he's a stickier player with his decision making. You do see some improvement as a short roll player. They've gotten to that a little more with like, when he rolls off of a Desmond Bain or an Anthony Black or a Tyus Jones this year. But if you're not a dominant like on ball engine and your co-star is better at that and better off the ball and you can't really compensate off the ball, I do kind of wonder how they proceed. And I think kind of these next 5 months or however long Orlando season lasts could really dictate whether it's worth exploring a trade of Paolo this offseason. You could also even like maybe Paolo turns it around and Franz never quite figures it out and they decide to shop Franz. That wouldn't be the way I'd approach it, but I could see them going either direction if this season continues to fall short of expectations, given the price they paid for Desmond Bain to kind of take that next step and go from, pesky 7-8 seed to a team that could really make a deep run.
I think I am gonna buy that the Magic, I think, could be wise to move on from Paolo. And obviously it's hard to be like they should trade him because obviously like it's not as simple as just saying, oh, they should move on from their guy who doesn't work because they have tons of investment in him. But I do think it is getting to a breaking point where like I know the on-off splits, but like the him and Franz like on-off splits have been weird because I don't think the Franz on like Paolo off minutes have been good this year like they usually are. But obviously it's been like 5 or 6 games. So, but we have a lot of evidence at this point pointing towards the idea that Franz is a more effective primary and a more effective off-ball player. And like you said, there's more to off-ball play than shooting, right? Like, even though both are poor off-ball shooters, except for the playoffs, I guess, when Paolo just decides to never miss threes. But but Franz is like you said, he's so much more decisive. The ball doesn't stick. He's much more willing to quickly swing the ball or to drive off the catch. I mean, that's been a problem with Paolo forever, like since he was in high school. And it's a hard thing to develop, like especially for these guys who are like on-ball stars their whole lives. And especially into the NBA, it's like they don't really ever learn how to play off the ball, how to quickly make decisions, and how to kind of play within a team structure, which is like, I don't know, kind of like a nerd basketball nerdy thing to say, but it's very true. And it definitely matters. I think Paolo in the long term, like I still have faith in, but I am definitely open to the idea that like Orlando, one, I mean, for their, hopes of being a legit contender, and two, for Paolo's, I mean, even with the Bain edition, like the offensive context there is really poor. And it, we'd be remiss without mentioning that, it's not obviously not all Paolo's fault. Like he's not necessarily in a great situation for himself to succeed, but like it's he's not helping the cause, but I don't think it's a great kind of situation regardless. So I think it's worth exploring the moving on from Paolo. It's not like I'm just like shipping him off for anything, but if there's a legit offer for like a high-end star, another like high-end complimentary star, a team I don't know who that would be. Some team wants to take a swing on Paolo. I don't know. Suns call them for Booker. That's probably not gonna happen, but
yeah, and I think too, like, I mean, Paolo's having an okay season so far this year. Like, if you're gonna cast blame among any of their big three as the biggest reason they're 3-5, it would be Desmond Bain. I love the addition of him, but he's looking to drive the ball way more than he needs to on this team that needs shooting. His defense has been pretty spotty for them. When I thought he was a pretty solid defender most of his time in Memphis, so they need him to play a lot better. Obviously, kind of you need to figure out the offensive hierarchy. But they would probably be 5-3 or 4-4 at the very least if Desmond Bain is playing with the guy we saw in Memphis the last few years. He's changed his approach for the better, and he's just not making shots whatsoever. So obviously these questions spin around Paolo, and I understand why, but it is worth acknowledging that he's not kind of the biggest reason Orlando's off to a slow start this season. He's having a pretty solid year, even if there remain frustrations some of his shot selection and fit with other really good offensive players kind of in the long and short term.
Yeah, so I think we both come to this interesting place where it's like I do think the Magic could be beneficial to move in, but it's also not all Paolo's fault they're struggling. And kind of transitioning into the next question about the Magic kind of needing to shake up their coaching staff. Obviously, they've had Jamal Mosley there for probably like 4 years. Is he even there for like?
I think since Franz's rookie year,
Yeah, it's year 4 or 5 for him.
5. I think Franz is in his 5th year now, so at least 4 or 5. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a second. Obviously, the Magic have generally been ascending lately, but I do think it's reasonable to question the coaching, considering like it's definitely a rough offensive roster. Like it's not an elite offensive roster of talent, but I don't think it's as bad as the results have been at somewhat lately. So curious what your temperature would be on the whether it's Mosley or just like assistants or just shaking up the kind of scheme or ecosystem or whatever is kind of influencing the offensive issues.
Yeah, I'm someone who's been a pretty big proponent of Jamal Mosley. I love what he's done with their defense. I love how communicative he is on the sidelines and kind of getting guys to be in the right spots and recognizing sets to help them out with that defensively. But the offensive ecosystem is pretty atrocious. I don't think it's all related to personnel or play style for that personnel. So I would not at all be opposed to moving on from him. I mean, you've given him 4 years, and obviously you probably need a little more time. I would love to kind of see what things would look like it does May and get things straightened out on his own, and then kind of what the offense looks like and how that affects the defense for them. But certainly on the table, I wouldn't be pressing the button to fire him right now, but I could certainly see if Bain straightens it out, they figure out kind of the touches for Paolo and Franz. And obviously some of it is tied to coaching staff, but then they're still kind of treading water. Absolutely, I think it'd be worth to make a change there. So I just want to see more. I want to see guys get the ball on the move more often with this roster. With a guy like Suggs or a guy like Franz, I think both those guys are really good kind of catching the ball on the move. Same with Bain, but that's almost maybe hurt Bain at times because he wants to get downhill too much. And then too, like Franz has been off the ball way too much this year. I'm tired of watching Jalen Suggs and Anthony Black run pick and rolls, especially Anthony Black. I get it's a hard spot to be because Anthony Black has actually been a pretty intriguing kind of downhill creator this year, and he can't really do anything off the ball. But I would still rather trade those touches for stuff with Franz and Paolo and Desmond Bain on the ball in some ways. So I just think the hierarchy is in a really weird spot. I know it takes time when you make such a dramatic shift to your roster, but I would certainly be keeping an eye on whether it's a smart decision to move on from Mosley, and I would definitely be buying that take for now. Well, I guess it does say immediately, so I guess I would be putting like a pin on it and be interested in the idea, but not commit to it right now as a buy.
It's at the top of my watch list, but maybe not today.
Financially, I can't afford it right now, but it's maybe in a few months I can.
Yeah, after I get paid next month, maybe I'll buy this one. But I generally agree. I agree as well. I mean, if they fired Mosley today, I'd get it. I wouldn't probably like this soon, but I would understand it. Like he obviously is a very good defensive coach, and as you know, if you ever watched like a Magic game with the volume on, it's great. He's a treat. But these are the same offensive issues the Magic have had for years. Like their offensive sets and ideas aren't particularly creative. And when they are creative, they just kind of their players don't move urgently. It doesn't really matter that the Magic are a slower team. Like pace isn't correlated to offensive efficiency in any way. We know that. But one, I think a Magic team that like isn't that talented offensively could use some more pace. I've always felt that way. And two, I think the issue with me has always been like the urgency and the speed of their actions. Like they like walk to set screens, and you watch any Magic game and you'll see at least a couple of possessions where you have like 3 guys pointing somewhere and nobody seems to know where to go. And like you mentioned, like I think the easiest thing to point to beyond any like more granular tactical stuff is like the leaders in on-ball rate for the Magic are Jalen Suggs, Tyus Jones, and Anthony Black. Like.
That's dire stuff, or that could be reason enough. That could be cause enough for firing.
Right, because it's like Paolo is at 26.7, which is fine, but like Franz, like you said, 17.4% on ball rate. Just for some context, that is significantly lower than any season of his career since his rookie year. Last season, he was at 28% which was in the 99th percentile. This year, he's in the 80th percentile. And like we saw what Franz we all know what Franz can do with the ball in his hands. Like he is a truly special wing driver. and one of the best perimeter, like forward-sized playmakers in the entire league. Like, he's obviously a flawed player, and he's not playing his best ball to start this year. I definitely won't deny that. But I do think in some ways he is. Like, he's hitting his threes. I suppose that's something. But yeah, I just think there's so many easily identifiable offensive issues, whether it's the hierarchy of touches or on ball time. And it's not even as much the touches. It's like, I just don't want the ball to be with untrustworthy dribblers for most of the time. And that's generally how it is. And obviously with the Magic, there's only so much way around that with how they've built this roster, but definitely think they're exacerbating issues with the coaching and with the decision. And again, hard to know how much of it is Mosley saying, how much of it is assistants. Like, we're not in that room, but at some point, if all of these same issues continue to persist through different players, and we're seeing like different versions of players like come into this system and be like a worse version of themselves, then I think it's probably fair to start.
I would note the Magic are playing a lot faster this year. Their pace is up like 6 possessions per game. They're up from 30th, like 6th in pace this season.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think part of that is kind of goes back to Paolo's play style. He is just crushing when he gets a small on him in transition or semi-transition. But I also do wonder, I think in basketball circles we've talked increasingly about the weak link theory, and I think the Magic offense is kind of a great proof of that. They went out and got Desmond Bane, who again is not playing up to par, but there are still so many possessions where the ball swings around and it's like gets to a 26% three-point shooter or a guy who can't drive, and you're like, it only matters so much if you have Paolo and Franz and Bane out there who are all threats if the ball swings to a Jalen Suggs, or not Jalen, an Anthony Black or a Jonathan Isaac or a Goja Bataze or a Wendell Carter Jr., who is like a fine offensive player and has been playing well this year, but like all these guys that probably have moderate scoring efficiency on low scoring volume who are not threats. So I feel like they're a pretty strong case of this weak link theory being the area we're in for basketball, because I've watched 4 or 5 Magic games this year, and it's like, oh, that's a good offensive process, and the ball ends up in a guy's hands who the defense doesn't care at all about, and the possession dies right there, unfortunately.
Right.
So
And yeah, it's so tough. Even like, again, you make these marginal process improvements and then they can't show because of the roster, and then it's like, who is at fault? And the answer is everyone to some extent. But
yeah.
Let's move on from the Magic. We've got a couple Sixers takes. They've won a lot of games to start this year. We have at Joey D03.B Sky Social says the Sixers will host a playoff series and have multiple award seasons. And then at Big Guard Season says the Sixers will go undefeated. I think I'm gonna. Are we buying that last one?
I think maybe if they retroactively go look at some of the results, VAR will determine that those 3 losses.
Yeah, it's like a fantasy football like stat recount.
Yeah, that correction.
I believe the Sixers were undefeated when this question was.
Yes, they were 3-0 or 4-0.
Fair.
So.
To be fair, but the other question I am actually interested in. Sorry, but the Sixers hosting a playoff series and having multiple award winners. Currently, they would not be hosting a playoff series if the season ended today. They're, I believe, behind Chicago, Detroit. Oh, actually, no, Miami's 4-4. So they are technically a top 4 seed now, but like
they're tied for third. They're
tied for third. So are the Sixers going to host a playoff series and have multiple award winners? Playoff series, I would sell that one pretty hard. I do not see them.
I would sell both of those. I would be curious what the non-Rookie of the Year award would be. I guess maybe 6th man with Quentin Grimes. Which I could see, but I still would have a tough time.
Big more executive of the year.
When the Sixers get fully healthy with Paul George coming back eventually and Jared McCain getting further integrated, I have a tough time seeing Quentin Grimes' usage sustain where it is now, because I think probably when that was sweet, he was averaging like 18 or 19 on like 60+% true shooting, which are very viable number for a 6th man of the year winner. But I just have a tough time seeing that usage sustain. And I think for good reason for the Sixers. I think they've relied on too much. And I'll sell the hosting a playoff series as well. That one feels a lot more plausible to me, but the defense is a mess. I'm pretty sure they have pretty good 3-point luck through 8 games.
And they're still the 22nd best defense in the league.
Yeah, and I mean, Embiid clearly doesn't look like he's gotten better and better the last couple of weeks, but clearly still doesn't look like a guy who's going to be the game record offensively we're accustomed to. I'm curious what Paul George looks like. I thought he actually was pretty good last year defensively when he played, but he's not an anchor by any means. He's very much a cog in a good machine rather than someone who's kind of uplifting a downtrodden unit.
He was solid last year. Just
yeah,
he's a role player, but solid.
Yeah, and I think teams are going to continually kind of figure out VJ Edgecombe's tendencies offensively. The jumper is going to fall back down to earth a little bit, I think, as well. Even though I really do like the shooting confidence he's showing and kind of the polish as a complimentary pick and roll ball handler. And then, we're both guys who have watched Maxey play for a long time, huge fans. But I think I do kind of worry about kind of the interior scoring still if he has this massive of a load on him offensively. The 2-point percentage is below 50%, and he's shooting 46% from three, and then
like 50, like above 50 or something on off dribble threes, like absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think the offense could be the best in the league once McCain and George and Embiid all get kind of up to full strength. I don't know what that looks like for Embiid, but even if he's kind of the guy we're seeing right now offensively with a fully healthy PG and Embiid, and that's a really, really good trio plus Maxey, of course. So I'm interested in the home court advantage take, but I'm gonna sell both of these overall, I think.
Yeah, the 6-man of the year one is tough because they theoretically have a lot of options. Like Jared McCain, if he is supposed to be back very soon, right?
He played against the Bulls on Tuesday.
Yeah, so he's back, and again, it's theoretically someone who's good enough to win that award, but there's just you can't have 3 6-man of the year candidates on one team. They're just not going to win it.
Joe Ingles and Jordan Clarkson both finished. They finished first and second in 2021. Which
it's hilarious. I forgot about that.
It's hilarious. The spirit. You have 2 6 men. I don't
know. So awesome.
That works, but
two can't think of 2 more divergent 6th men than Jordan Clarkson and Joe Ingles. But just going, yeah. I mean, I guess if we count all NBA, all rookie, all defense teams, but I feel like that's not an award. It's an accolade, but I wouldn't necessarily call it being an award winner. Because Tyrese Maxey is certainly playing like an all NBA player, right?
I would take the over on 1.5 accolades.
Yeah,
between just Maxey and Edgecombe, I think
for sure
Maxey is probably a good bet to be an all-star this year, and Edgecombe's going to make all-rookie most likely, barring injury for both of them.
For sure, yeah. Who knows if VJ is going to sustain the rookie of the year pace that he's probably on right now, but he's going to get. I mean, he's clearly a focal point for this team, and he's going to get an opportunity to be an all-rookie level player for the rest of the year. I think nobody on this team is winning Defensive Player of the Year. Any clutch player of the year candidates on the Sixers? Maybe?
Yeah, I know they've been really good in the clutch so far this year. I would imagine Maxey is their best candidate for that, but I haven't looked.
I haven't looked either. I'm quickly looking right now. Nobody in the top 20. Oh yeah, so Maxey's tied for 14th in clutch points at 35.3% field goals. Man, maybe we got to push that agenda down the road. We got to get Maxey's shot quality up in the clutch. I'll say that. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the Sixers are interesting. They're a fun team. Ultimately, to me, this is just fun, potent, regular season offense team. They definitely probably will make the playoffs. We'll probably be in the playoffs, but I'm not gonna. But I wouldn't bet on them hosting a home playoff series, even though, like you said, East is weak, and a lot of the teams that we thought would be in that race, even we just talked about Orlando, right? Atlanta's been a little shaky. Trey isn't healthy. Yeah. The Pistons have been strong record-wise to start the year, but I don't think they're infallible by any means. They're probably better than the Sixers, but
I would bank on them being a more reliable.
Yeah,
I would say ceiling-wise, I think you probably feel like the Sixers, but if they can reach that ceiling, feels like an improbable bet.
Exactly. Yeah, and they're not it's not like the Pistons are such a tier ahead of the Sixers, so many tiers ahead that it's the Cavs I'm probably still trusting a lot at that level, but yeah, it's possible, even if I wouldn't necessarily bank on it. we had a bunch of Spurs questions, which is prescient, which makes sense considering their strong start and Wemby being Wemby. So at J9 January says Spurs, if they're healthy, are a championship caliber team right now. Someone at Norin Rad 542 said parentheses overreaction. The Spurs will win it all, and Wemby will make the Spurs the team to be, as Jordan did for the Bulls. And then, to be fair, they said overreaction, and I'm gonna put that in because I did ask for overreactions. To be fair, and then at Jackson NBA 3, potentially a burner for you. The Spurs have 3 young players, parentheses, Wemby, Harper, Castle, that will all end up better than Amen Thompson, which is kind of separate from the first 2 questions, but intriguing enough for me to leave in there. But the basic question right here, are the Spurs, who are currently playing like one of the better teams in the league, at least in terms of record and net rating, they're 4th in net rating right now, 5-2. Are they contenders? Are they pretenders? What are we thinking?
Yeah, so I was on a podcast last week and I put them as contenders, but I think they were maybe like the last of my group there, but I'm not changing my opinion on that, but I do recall being like just trying to have some fun with it. If I was getting like super, super serious, I would have them in like maybe the outer circle of contention. If I had to tier contenders within the contention status, I would have them outside of it. Ultimately, I don't trust their wing play enough. I think the guard dynamic once Fox and Harper are back, with Castle kind of slotting into a more optimal role alongside Wemby, all 4 of those guys is really nice. But I think when your wing grouping is like Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Harrison Barnes, Julian Champagny, you're kind of one really, really good wing short. And I'm not someone who over-indexes on the need for wings, but I think you need kind of a kingmaker at every position group that fills in different gaps. I'm just a little lower on that group for them, though I do think those guys have all played really well to start the year. Vassell's having a really nice year on both ends. Keldon's been kind of a fun, like Swiss Army knife who just kind of batters his way to chances on both
He's
ends.
rebounding like an absolute madman right now.
He's a good cutter and he's a strong finisher, I believe. I don't know the numbers, but
76% at the rim this
yeah,
season.
Harrison Barnes, like despite all of his flaws, is still a really nice shooter. So like that's not a bad wing grouping for like a team that should make the playoffs, but I think your players get under a lot more scrutiny once you kind of look at them through a championship POV.
For sure.
And I think the Spurs just fall a little short there. And I also just think like Wemby has a little bit more seasoning required to be like a really, really good offensive engine in a playoff context. I'm just not sure he's quite there as like a dominant creator. I don't think he has to be a great creator because of how versatile he is, but I still think he has some work to do as a creator to kind of reach those levels and carry an offense the way he'd probably have to in a playoff set. Even though I do think Harper and Fox will be really, really useful once they're back and healthy.
I just think this year's probably a little rich. Like, if you want to say in 2027 they're going to run through the league and win the title, I'd be much more open to that. But like you said, I think it's just not the level of roster in terms of like star talent anyways. Like, they have guys who can maybe get there. Like, Castle's been, intriguing to start the year. I think Harper's played like a bona fide star, and obviously his injury is a bummer. Assuming he's fine, which he should be, then I think that's another legit star for you. And Wemby, like you said, he has his own creation issues, right? Like, and I think the roster not being perfect around him also amplifies those at times when teams can sit on a guy like Stephon Castle and kind of force him into his more destructive habits, or like they don't really have like backup point guard play with the current health of their roster, which obviously shouldn't be an issue once everyone's healthy, but it is just like a weird build. Like, I like Luke Cornett a lot. I think he's a hugely useful piece for them, but I do think the Spurs are ultimately a star away on offense, probably, to really being a legit this season title contender. Like, even then, they're 4th in the league in net rating, but they're a canyon behind the top 3 of Houston, Oklahoma City, and Denver right now. Like, they really aren't that close to those 3 teams in terms of the analytics and just like my opinion on those teams. But this is probably a bit rash for me. So I definitely sell the Spurs being like real contenders, like in championship level team right now, since that is what the take said.
Yeah, and it feels like you just would need to rely on like 2 or 3 of Champagny, Barnes, and Cornette more than I would like. I mean, Sohan's back as now. I think he played against the Lakers in a limited role last night, which is nice. But he, of course, has his own offensive issues too. So I
Yeah,
just feel like there's like one or two many highly flawed players that you would need in the rotation to really count on. But that all being said, they clearly have a lot of assets. They have a lot of future picks. They have some young guys that I think are not entirely integral to their future. That are still intriguing that they could move off of for some upgrades on the wing, and maybe some upgrades in just offensive creation on the wing, like you said. So, but we're obviously just assessing them through the lens of who they are currently.
for sure. And like, yeah, Wemby's been a very efficient creator to begin the year, but I'm just like you said, I'm skeptical about, and even again, like obviously he's a third year player. This is, he's Wemby, but he's still a third year player. And I think when you see teams loading up, throwing like smaller, sturdier bodies and just showing him multiple, like there's some Giannis rules in the way that teams are guarding Wemby, even though they kind of manifest very differently. Since Giannis is obviously much more of like a downhill battering ram, and Wemby is going to kind of catch in his spots, but it's still the same idea. Like you have to show these aliens with incredible size and ball skills and vision and stuff, multiple bodies, and you have to kind of defend them a certain way. And you've seen a couple teams bother Wemby lately with that, and I'm sure playoff teams will be able to emulate some of the stuff that like Phoenix has done to slow down Wemby. And again, not to take away from this season he's having, because he's been unbelievable, of course. But I think when you're talking about these teams, like we're talking about through the lens of championship contention, it's just a bit high of a bar for me at the moment.
Yeah, so I would sell that one for sure.
Cool. Quickly, I want to hit on the Spurs have 3 young players that will all end up better than Amen Thompson. I'm saying we probably agree on one of them for sure. I'll say we take Wemby.
Yeah, I mean, he's younger and better his entire career, so I think that one pretty easy with all due respect to Amen Thompson.
Yeah. So do we think that all 3 are going to be better than Amen? I don't. I'm selling this take personally.
Yeah, I would sell it, but I would take 2 of them. I would take Harper over Amen.
Yep, I would as
I
well.
really like Amen, and I think, and I also really like Castle, but I think just there's more avenues for Amen to work around kind of the shooting deficiencies. Granted, I would say Castle's a better shooter.
Castle's a great athlete and like a very unique one with how he moves and decelerates, but he's not.
Yeah, he's also a lesser defender, though. I would have liked a lot of what Castle's done this year, but I would take 2/3 of that take. I suppose.
Yeah, same. I'm like, I'll go like over 2 at like under 2.5, because like I definitely would take Harper.
We have to round up and we buy the take. Is that how that works? Is take her or leave it?
Harper's just
I would take 2 of those guys.
It's just ridiculous, and it's going to be an obvious like stud for a long time, and I think Amen will too, but I do think Harper, like being a more traditional on-ball creator, is just like I'd prefer him to Amen, but I don't think it's like crazy to prefer Amen, but I'd take Harper at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Let's move on to our last couple set of questions about the Bulls. We had a good amount of questions about them. At merb93.bsky.social says the Bulls are winning 55 plus games if they stay healthy. And our pal Emiliano at Emiliano9R8 says, an anonymous friend obliged me to say Josh Giddey All-Star, but this is your take, Emiliano, today, so you're not getting around this. So Bulls have been really impressive. Are we buying the Bulls being, potentially high 50s? If they win 55 games in the East, they're going to be a home playoff team. So are we buying the Bulls being like a host a playoff series team? And are we buying Josh Giddey being an all-star? Because he's certainly producing like one, at the very least, in the box score to begin this season, to definitely warrant like all-star level consideration. I mean, just 23 points, 9 assists, 8.6 rebounds on efficiency just below league average. So curious what you're thinking about the Bulls and Giddey right now, because they're an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people expect them to be as good as they are right now.
Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, I had a blast watching their game against the Sixers, and obviously their broadcasting team led by Stacey King's boisterous, enthusiastic nature is a joy. But no, I'll sell this take about winning 55 games. I think the offense is going to be quite good. Like I don't know about like dominant or elite, but like top 7 or 8 probably. They move the ball well. They get out in transition. They have a very good passer and Giddey running things. A stretch five is who can kind of bang inside, and Vooch is never a bad place to be. It can also pass. But I think that defense is going to be horrendous. I know it's above average right now, but it's a lot of shooting luck. When you look at cleaning the glass, their effective field goal percentage is 52% when you base it on adjusting for luck and shot region, I guess, or shot location, I guess, is 56.2%. So that's over 4% gap between actual effective field goal percentage defensively and location expected. And of course, that's not a foolproof theory, but it would drop them from 6th in effective field goal percentage defensively to 29th, which I don't necessarily think would be as big of a drop as you'd expect. There's things you can do to influence where a team shoot and how comfortable they are on those spots, but I think it speaks to a lot of how lucky they've been that they have one of the lowest 3-point like percentages against them. They're getting really lucky about teams not finishing around them at the rim, despite like allowing the most shots against them at the rim. So, and like I've watched enough of Vucevic in my life to know he's not like some dominant rim protector that is impacting things a lot. It's not like there's a Wemby in there or a Gobert or a Walker Kessler who's kind of spooking teams into shooting there and just kind of rejecting the hell out of them. So
It's not Vooch.
yeah, I'll sell them as a 55-win team, but like if you lowered it to 45, I would be a lot more interested. Though I don't know exactly where I land on that, but I think they could definitely be at least 500 or better.
Yeah, just
this offense
speaking about the luck, like speaking of Vooch, 69 true shooting 49% from threes, 65% from mid range. Ayo Dosunmu, who's been awesome and who's a good player, is also like shooting 50% from threes, 60% from mid range. So we're certainly going to get regression from some of these players. I think I like Billy Donovan. I really like what he's done with the Bulls structure. I think he has them playing really well on offense. Like, I don't trust the defense long term. I mean, just the roster as well is just it's such a poor defensive front court. And like they've got some pieces. Like their perimeter defensive pieces aren't terrible. Like Ayo can really defend. Okoro obviously has so many offensive issues, but he's a great perimeter defender. I think Matas is going to develop into an excellent defender. Trey Jones has been excellent defending the perimeter to start the year, but like hard to really go deep in the playoffs with like Vooch and Jalen Smith and Patrick Williams is like your main front court, or even be a 55-win team for that matter. Yeah. But I do think
some numbers on kind of the luck that I was mentioning defensively. They're top 5 and lowest percentage at the rim, short mid range, all mid range, and top 7 and lowest 3-point percentage against them. So there's a lot of luck going into that. They are suppressing threes pretty well. They're one of the, I think they're first in or second in 3-point. They're second in lowest 3-point rate against them, but 30th in rim rate. So you probably don't want to be that low in rim rate when Nikola Vucevic is your defensive anchor. So I just think they have a lot of issues with kind of personnel and a little bit strategy. I would not be funneling that many shots to Vucevic. That seems like a poor strategy.
Yeah, I think I definitely enjoy I enjoy the way they're playing right now. It's definitely been a fun team to watch. And like we said, I think they have a really good like offensive ecosystem generally. Like they get good shots. PvP stats is shot quality, like expected effective field goal percentage has the Bulls as the best shot quality team in the league, which like I can understand. Just watch them. Like they get a lot of open threes. I think all the kind of opposite of what I talked about with the Magic earlier, like their sets, I feel like they all seem to know where they're going. They run them with urgency. you don't often see like 3 guys running into each other or like a drive with 2 players in the paint. It definitely happens. It's always going to happen. But like the Bulls have enough good shooters and I think are really well coached on offense at the moment that I am definitely buying them being like a good team this year because I trust that offense to sustain. And Kobe White hasn't been there either, which is huge. He's a fantastic offensive player. Did you see his quote today about the walkie-talkies?
Yeah, so yeah, he's just like keeping himself entertained with them.
They're like the reporter's like, did they show you how to use it? And he's like, no, they won't tell me.
Yeah, Kobe seems like a great personality. And just a fun player to watch. So I'm hoping he comes back healthy and good to go soon. But yeah, I agree. I think that the offense should be pretty dang good and fun, dynamic the rest of the regular season. But the defense, I think, just has too many personnel issues, and I don't love how many shots they're conceding around the rim, given their personnel. It's pretty concerning. But as for the Giddey take, I think it's completely plausible he makes the All-Star game this year. I need to watch more of the Bulls because I understand that he's driving better. I understand the confidence in the 3 is better. He's obviously hitting more of them. But in the games I've caught, it still feels like a lot of just like, he's a lot of his stats or a lot of his scoring is compiled like the easiest routes possible, like a broken play on a switch or like they inbound the ball quicker before the defense can get set, which is not to take away from him. Like points are all points, but like I still haven't seen a lot of like star level creation from him. The passing is great. He absolutely creates a lot of star level passes as a playmaker, but the scoring growth, I don't know how sold I am on it. But the numbers will be there. And if the Bulls are solid, he'll obviously kind of be their torchbearer for why they're a solid team this year.
Yeah.
So, but I just want to see more if I really buy him as like having made massive, massive strides as a scorer, because it still feels a little gimmicky, feels rude to kind of what he's doing, but it does feel
To
just
me,
like,
it feels manufactured more
yeah,
than like
he's just
it's not like it's
in the
not
easy
necessarily
way.
gimmicky because I think a lot of the ways he's scoring can continue to work, like cross matches in early offense,
Yeah.
and like quick movement off the ball into a drive. Like I do trust him to do that, and the definitely think the point like would be the rim frequency
Yeah.
and the rim volume. Like he is 100th percentile right now in rim attempts per 100 possessions, and he's always been high up. Like he's always been pretty high up in his career, but definitely the best mark of his career, slightly above 2023 in Oklahoma City, and he's definitely just like a more efficient player. I do want to read that the numbers do bear out the idea that his creation scoring is not nearly as effective as his other play type scoring. On isolation, ball handler, and post play types, he's at minus 9.5 relative true shooting. And on spacing and finishing, which, spacing, just spot ups, off screen, handoff, he's at plus 9.1, and on finishing plays, which include transition, so it's not always finishing. Transition, putback, cuts, roller, he's at 13.1% relative true shooting. So definitely some balancing out that I think is going to happen in terms of like when they play more really good defenses and when they play more teams who are like well equipped. They've had some good moments against like the Knicks, but I think once the Knicks were turning to like OG more as a Giddey defender, which like props on him for earning that respect from the defense. I think you can definitely see the issues like when you actually put really quality defenders on him. And like, again, that's really tough. That's a tough thing to do, but the Bulls, I think, like have played some pretty good teams, but I don't think the defenses they've played are
and I guess these are almost two separate questions too, where like I think it's absolutely possible. Like I would buy Josh Giddey as making the All-Star team this year.
Oh yeah,
but I'm like
actually being an All-Star level player,
star level creator in a playoff context, which is not the same question and probably a little unfair to the direction I took it. But he also has been better. Like he's trying a lot more fouls. Like his free throw rate's by far the highest of its career. I mean, it's like nearly 3 times what it was during his time in OKC and like almost 10% higher than last year. So there's clear improvements in his game. I guess I was just kind of scrutinizing him from a different perspective, but I would not at all be surprised if he's named.
No, I agree with you. I think from the literal interpretation of the question, I think it's very because I mean, regardless like of how we view exactly how impactful he is, he's on a good team. The East is bad, and he's going to have ridiculously good counting stats. I think his efficiency is going to be solid enough to where it's not going to like totally tank him. I do think it could. We could see it dip. Like I said, it's just a bit below league average. It wouldn't shock me if we saw that dip to like a couple points below league average. But I mean, if he's on this really high usage still and he's creating a ton of shots for his teammates, I think that's still okay. I think he can still be like a somewhat worthy Eastern Conference All-Star. But I'm skeptical of him being like
the pool isn't great either. Like, Halliburton's out. Garland's probably facing an uphill battle to be eligible with his
no
injury.
Lillard, no Tatum.
Out. Trey's probably not going to make with his injury. Levine's obviously in another conference as well now. No Drew Holiday. I know Drew didn't make it out of the year with the Celtics, but
there's a guy who's not walking through that door. There's
so it's totally possible. The Nets aren't going to have anyone. The Wizards aren't going to have anyone.
Hero hasn't played.
Yeah, LaMelo's dealing with the ankle injuries already again, unfortunately. So, and that's not like to take away from what Giddey's done, but just means it makes his case even easier.
And that's just part of the All-Star discussion. It's factor in.
It's not his fault the guys are injured.
Exactly. It's he's taking advantage of the field, and again, I think the more interesting discussion is are they truly star-level impact players when it matters? But it's also interesting in some way to talk about awards. I think he's in a good position to be an All-Star this year. Quickly wanted to hit our last question, which is at One's Dare Tour. No idea. I'm really sorry. The Bucks are a serious threat to win the East. Buying or selling this one?
I will be selling this one. I actually went and watched a couple of Bucks games today to get a better concrete feel for them. And I just don't love the defensive personnel still on the perimeter. I think they just lack kind of the range. I think I know that AJ Green is a very nice, solid, sturdy defender and can give really good players some issues. And I know Ryan Rollins can do some stuff as a screen navigator and defensive playmaker. But I think they just really struggle to have kind of the range on the perimeter defensively. Watching that Raptors game, the Raptors, of course, hit a bunch of threes that they wouldn't hit every game, but it was a lot of the Bucks failing to have the range to stunt and recover effectively. This isn't this isn't the most fair way to do it, but watch them the Thunder, they're really good at stunting and recovering because of how much range and quickness they have with their guys. I think the Bucks are just too limited there. And if you swap in some more defensive-minded players, then you ruin kind of the 5-out offense that makes them.
You watch team like Portland or other good defenses. Yeah, and they're like that too. It's not just OKC.
That just really popped to me in watching a couple of their games. I think the defensive personnel is too limited, and when you try and prop it up, then you ruin kind of what makes them such a good offense with their personnel. So I would be selling them, as a championship contender, but that offense is really, really good. And I think they're certainly a strong contender for a top 4 seed this year.
I think they're just a little too one-dimensional to be a legit contender. I wrote about their offense last week. They're still the number 1 half-court offense as of recording this. They've been a ridiculously good offensive player. I think Giannis is arguably playing the best offensive ball of his career. Ryan Rollins has been a revelation for them on offense. But ultimately, it wasn't enough with Lillard, right? It's not going to be enough with Ryan Rollins and Cole Anthony. It just won't. And like you said, the defensive, it's not like a untenable regular season defensive roster or anything. They've been a fine enough regular season defense, pretty poor in the half court. But not enough to totally tank their season. Yeah. Like you said, they don't have the rim protection. Miles Turner's a nice shot blocker, but as we talked about plenty, he has his limitations in terms of guarding stronger players and his mobility at this stage. Even though I do think he's sprier than he's got that early season spring in his step. But I do think we have plenty of evidence that he's a imperfect, even if useful defensive player. And then just the perimeter wing play, especially considering Giannis is not that level of defensive player anymore. And part of that is it's very hard to be with his kind of offensive responsibility, but he's just not the all-world defender that he was years ago. Even last playoff series, we can see he wasn't able to be crazy impactful because he was carrying an enormous offensive load and the Pacers could target him over and over because of that. And he's not going to be as attentive making rotations and saving stuff and plugging up gaps on the backside when he has to be creating as much as he is. And part of it, he's just not as athletic as he was at his peak. He's still a freakish athlete, but, by the standards of 2020 Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's just not there anymore. So I do think ultimately, like you said, there's like solid defensive pieces on the team. Like I like AJ Green, I like Ryan Rollins. I think like Kuzma's had an all right year on defense so far. Like he's holding up probably better than he did last year. And like they're getting some buy-in from these guys, but ultimately, when we're talking about a team like, man, they got these really scrappy perimeter defenders. I don't know. It's like probably.
Yeah, we talk a lot about offense. You need like an engine and a co-star to be really good on one end, on that end. Defense is the same way, right? Like you
For
can't
sure.
like they don't really have anyone that you project as like the one that sets the tone on the perimeter, one that anchors things inside. With Miles, I think he's more of like a shot blocker than a rim protector these days.
For sure.
Not a guy who's impacting things on a possession by possession basis as much. So, yeah, like I think they're a good team. I think I was definitely too low on them entering the season, just with how dynamic I think their offense can be. But
Yeah.
just watching a couple of their games recently, like how much they're struggling defensively to keep the ball in front and cover kind of mistakes and backside rotations, I just really worry about what that might look like against some really, really good teams in the playoffs, particularly, who could come out of the West in the kind of the different style. I mean, you look at three or four of the best teams let's just say like five different teams in the West, like the Lakers, Warriors, Rockets, Nuggets, and Thunder, all play kind of different offensive styles that I think would tear apart the Bucks defensively. So I
Right.
think that would be a
And
really
we've
good.
already seen like the issues with their defense early in the year
Yeah,
that
against the
like
Kings and the Raptors, who I think are both going to be worse offenses than the five I mentioned there.
I'll always give them a shot to make a run with as long as they have Giannis playing at this level. I'm not going to count them out entirely, but I would sell them as true contenders. A lot of selling today, but we bought a couple takes, and I really appreciate you coming on, Jackson, and giving your generous time. Really appreciate all the insight, fun conversation. This is you can plug anything you want. Where the Jackson doesn't write as much stuff these days as he used to, but
Yeah, I would just be plugging most of the stuff that you're right. And yeah, you can read Ben and all of our coworker stuff over at sportscasting.com. We've been doing a great job there. Ben did write a nice article about the Bucks offense earlier this week. He has a rookie letter that came out, I believe on Wednesday. So and we got
gonna have
plenty of
something on Austin Reeves later this week, who's
yeah,
been
he's been tearing it up. So Reeves been tearing it
rad.
up. Ben's been crushing it. Everyone else there. So definitely check out sportscasting.com and really appreciate anyone who reads our work.
So we've got an awesome group of guys over there. None better than our wonderful editor, Jackson Frank. But thanks so much for coming on, and thank you all for listening and watching. If we didn't get to your take, I'll do something like this eventually again. We had so many questions, but thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day or whenever you're watching this.